Doctors once considered ADHD a standalone disorder. They were wrong.
I said, what? She said, yeah. I said, no.
We now know that 50% of us also suffer from one or more additional condition, which is officially referred to as comorbidity, or get misdiagnosed by a condition that has very similar symptoms to ADHD. In this video, we will go over the top 5 of these to help you figure out a bit more about yourself and maybe check if you got misdiagnosed. Welcome back to ADHD Vision, where you can learn how to use ADHD to your advantage. So if you haven't already, why don't you consider subscribing? Let's just start with jumping right into the deep end with number 1, depression. Depression is something more than just a 2-day mood swing. It's a deep sadness and despair you feel every day for at least 2 weeks at a time, and it can make everything in your life, like working and sleeping, harder. Now, what's the connection to ADHD? Well, first it's important to note that some symptoms of ADHD and depression are a lot alike. Trouble focusing, for example, is, as we know, a symptom of ADHD and actually depression. And if you take medication to help with your ADHD, they may affect your sleep or eating habits, which are also signs of depression. Now, if you want to check out all of the types of ADHD medication there are, I made a video on this, which you can check out on the top right. Overall, however, ADHD and depression are connected because people can get depression when having a hard time with their ADHD symptoms. Even though we make up an estimated 5% of the world population, we are still very much in the minority in a world that is built up by predominantly non-ADHDers, where we are expected to fit into this majority. This can then often lead to deep feelings of hopelessness, especially, I think, if you don't know what ADHD even is, let alone that you might have it. If you are currently struggling with depression, please reach out to a therapist. All I can tell you is that you are not alone. Number 2, learning disabilities like dyslexia. Learning involves using the executive functions of the brain, particularly the ability to focus, pay attention, etc. We all know that ADHD affects the executive functions of our brains, meaning that our brain perceives information very differently.
I understand that I'm rare.
This is something most of us have experienced in school, where we might have been really good at subjects that were interesting to us, but couldn't bring ourselves to focus on other subjects. But we all know this. Something that a lot of you might not know is that about 25% of people with ADHD also have dyslexia, which is a brain-based specific learning disability affecting our language ability, making it difficult to read, spell, decode, and recognize words. Please note that this does not mean you are unintelligent. In fact, according to a study, most people with dyslexia have normal or above average intelligence. If you are currently struggling with dyslexia, I highly recommend checking out this week's sponsor, the Orcam Read. This little machine packs a lot of powerful tech into a handheld device, allowing you to scan written text, which the device then reads back to you. You can use it on almost any surface, and all you have to do is point, wait a few seconds, and listen, making your life a lot easier. Here's an example of how you can use this little machine in your everyday life.
Origin of species.
Now, their Black Friday discounts are actually starting early this year, so be sure to check it out. The link is in my bio. Number 3, anxiety. This one I know a lot of you can relate to. How do I know? Well, thanks to research, we know that about 50% of adults with ADHD also have anxiety. Now, again, having anxiety disorder is more than just feeling occasionally anxious. According to Healthline, it's a mental illness that is serious and long-lasting. It can make you feel distressed, uneasy, and excessively frightened in seemingly regular situations. And so, if you have strong anxiety, it will also be affecting a lot of areas in your life, similarly to depression. Now, even though there is a lot of overlap between anxiety and ADHD, like symptoms of hyperactivity and lack of attention, the big difference is that anxiety mainly involves issues with nervousness and fear. I, for one, can definitely relate to this because as a kid I had social anxiety where I would just always get nervous talking to other people or presenting in front of the class, etc. I now work in sales and thankfully managed to overcome most of these symptoms, but they definitely were very inhibiting when I grew up. Now, researchers don't actually yet know how ADHD and anxiety are linked. It might just be a part of ADHD and therefore also be genetic. Number 4, obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD. Similar to anxiety, OCD and ADHD share a lot of common symptoms which can result in potential misdiagnoses. Although it isn't that common as the latter ones, it is possible for us to have ADHD and OCD at the same time. Now, to avoid misdiagnosis, the biggest difference between OCD and ADHD is that ADHD is an externalizing disorder, which means problems arise because of the way we respond and interact with our environment. OCD, on the other hand, is considered an internalizing disorder where someone with OCD reacts to stressful events internally, for example, with obsessive thoughts and compulsions that have a sense of control over them. Number 5, sensory processing disorder. Constantly fidgeting and squirming, invading personal space, melting down in public. These can be signs of both ADHD and sensory processing issues. Finding out the difference of ADHD or SPD is often difficult because, according to one study, 40% of children who showed symptoms of either ADHD or SPD had symptoms of both. But they are different and should therefore be diagnosed separately. People with sensory processing issues have an under or oversensitivity to sensory output such as sights, sounds, flavors, smells, and textures.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.
Now, before we end it here, if you are currently struggling with dyslexia, be sure to check out the OrCam Read, which is a tool that has helped a lot of people with dyslexia around the world already. The link is down below. I really think that you can benefit from this tool right here. Other than that, as always, be sure to check out these related videos if you haven't already. I will see you again very soon. Stay inspired. Till next time, guys.